Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome students for the bio session. Today we'll be learning about fundamental unit of life. See, before we start with the topic, as usual, I shall ask you to go through the slide. See, whatever the images you see, can you get some idea what exactly I want to say about this? See this polar bear, fish, the human, the birds, giraffe and the tree. All this organism that are present, we say them as living, right? Why we call them as living? Because they can perform certain life activities. What sort of life activities? Like if it's going to consume some food, it has to be broken down, then digested to release some energy. Your body is going to utilize energy for different process of life. Then ultimately whatever is waste that is not required for the body will be thrown out of the body. So that process like digestion, respiration, excretion, etc. all this are termed as life activities. Now what is common in that picture? So we see that there are different forms of organism. They look different. They stay in a different location. So apart from that, there is something common that is present in them. And that common thing is all those organisms that we saw in the slide was made up of cell. Now what is cell? Cells are the basic unit of life. All these organisms are made up of cells and they are just the building blocks. Like we had studied, atoms are the building blocks of matter. Similarly, cells are the building blocks of an organism. Now that means all the organism will have same cells, size is same, shape is same. Do you think? No. Since they are different organisms, they will obviously have different shape, different size. What about organisms such as giraffe? And if you take this tiny rat, do they have same cells? If giraffe is larger, huge, will it have a huge cell? And if a rat is very little small, does it have very small cell? No, there's no difference with respect to the size. The size of an organism does not depend upon the size of a cell, but it depends upon the function it performs. So we can say that the giraffe and the rat will have same type of cells, but the number of cells will be different. Giraffe will have more cells compared to the little rat. Now let us have some examples. Here we could see that there are a variety of cells. Few are the simplest cells like the bacterial cells, then amoeba. Then you have complex cells from the plant cells. These two are animal cells like RBC and nerve cells. So do you find any difference in them? Yes, they do. Certain cells are made up of more number and these cells are individual made up of single cell. Now how do we classify organism? We can classify them based on the number of cells. It can be uni. When we say uni, it is just made up of single cell. Then what about multicellular? They will have more than one cell and those cells together they form a bunch. Then later on they can perform different activities together as a team. Now let's know what are the examples of unicellular organism. See here we have given an example as amoeba and paramecium. Both of these cells are made up of just one cell. So we can say that this just single cell will take out all the life activities. What do you mean by life activities? All those life process that keeps the cell alive. Excretion, digestion, respiration, whatever we have learned, these are the life process that keep the cell alive. So how is it different from multicellular organism? So here in this case we have taken human and tree. These are multicellular organism. So what difference we find here is, instead of a single cell taking all the activities or taking the job of performing different function, what they do is they are going to divide their function. So there is division of labor. That means each cell is going to take a specific function, and they together as a whole, they work in team to build up the organism. The entire organism will be run by these many types of cells performing together. Now we have learned what a cell is. Do you know what a cell theory is about? So there are different views of how a cell must have arisen, how the first cell must have arisen, and what are the different forms of life that existed. So there are a few views of the scientists. By performing certain research things, they got to know that almost all the living cells are made up of, living organisms are made up of cells. And it could be unicellular, just having a single cell, or it could be a multicellular. And the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living things. That means the structure of a cell will show what type of function it performs, and this is unique for different organisms. So now next thing what we learned is the cells will appear only from pre-existing cells. How they appear? They appear through cell division. Now this is an example of a multicellular organism. Okay, this is unicellular, and how this is, see here you can see there are more than one type of cell. The example here we have given. The last point, it exists only from pre-existing cells through cell division. So what it says is there should be one cell from which other cell will form. How they will form? Through division. Single cell will divide into two, and this in turn will divide and give rise to a new cell or a new organism. So the entire points what we have just learned is termed as cell theory. This was given by three scientists, Schleiden, Schwann and Virchow. Now let us know the individual cell. Animal cell, which type of cell it belongs to, whether it is unicellular or multicellular. So it is a multicellular, right? Now see here we have taken the example of the cheek cell, the human cheek cell. So the internal this skin layer of your cheek, when it is observed under the microscope, it appears this way. Do you find any difference with respect to the structure? Yes, we can see that the cells are irregularly shaped. There is no definite pattern of arrangement. And moreover, the cell is slightly spherical, right? And there is a thin membrane which is separating the cell from others. It has a nucleus. So when we enlarge, we could see that this is what the structure. Each cell will appear this way with the external plasma membrane, the basic cytoplasm as well as nucleus. So these are the three important components of a cell which is common for different forms of life. So though they are complex, but these structure remains same throughout this organism. There can be some inclusion or there can be less things which can be present. Now this is a typical plant cell. You can take the root cell of an onion, and when you peel a thin slice of that and place it under microscope, it will be visible like this. When you compare this with the previous slide, we can see that the cells are more regularly arranged. So they have a definite pattern how they are being placed, and they have a boundary which attaches with other cell, right? So if you are going to enlarge this, each typical cell is going to appear this way, wherein it will have the basic characters like the external plasma membrane, this internal fluid like substance which is the cytosol or the cytoplasm, and the nucleus. So these are the three basic components. Let it be any type of cell, it should have these. Apart from that, you have other components, like you have the cell organelles. What are these? The cell will have sub-compartments or substructures which are present in organism. And these structures, they have their specific function. For example, if I show this structure, this is chloroplast. What it does? It helps the plant to make food. Then what is the process? You know, right? It is photosynthesis. Now what is the distinct feature that you see in this cell is it is having a very large vacuole. This helps in storage. The individual components of the cell, what it does, what specific role it has, where it is placed, we will be studying in next session. Now here you could see that whether it is a plant cell or an animal cell, all these are made up of cells, and cells are the building blocks. Now if you take one similar cell, it can combine together to form what we call as tissue. Similar cells, when they group, it forms tissue, and this many number of tissue will form an organ. This organ will form organ system that gives rise to an entire organism. Thank you.